Welcome to the Gabija podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Dr. Gabija Toleikyte, who is a neuroscientist and a professional coach. She received training as a coach while doing her PhD in neuroscience and started coaching people while in the university. And today we will speak about her new book, Why the Fuck We Can Change. Dr. Toleikyte, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So I practiced your name before we started, and I'm sure I didn't pronounce it correctly. So can you, for the benefit of the audience, repeat it one more time, please?
It's a tricky one. It's called Toleikyte.
Toleikyte, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we all want to change. We want to change our stress level, how much we weigh. We want to have better relationship. We want to be better performance, have better performance at work. And this is the topic of your book. We will get into it in a minute, but I would like to know a little bit about you. Who are you? Where do you come from? What is it that attracted you towards neuroscience? How painful was it for you to spend hours and hours in the library studying the brain?
Well, first of all, I come from Lithuania, and I was always really curious child. I really loved to learn and loved to understand why we do what we do. And that was, I think, what kind of drove me to choose neuroscience as my area of PhD. I came to do PhD to London, University College London, mainly because there is some really, really fascinating research laboratories, which they investigate memory and navigation and all sorts of other areas. But while doing my PhD, I realized that what I really, really cared about is actually helping people to understand themselves better. And of course, it was, during the PhD, I spent enormous amounts of time in the dark room of the lab, looking at the brain slices and doing all sorts of speculations with the neurons. But ultimately, I kept kind of always being thirsty for, okay, well, what does that mean about us as humans? Okay, and that's why I reached out for coaching training and started combining neuroscience with coaching, because I was like, the knowledge is great, but I want to apply it in practice. I want to use that knowledge to help people to understand themselves better and to help people do things in the way that creates more fulfilling life for them. And that's how it's all kind of, took that path. And in the book, I add together, neuroscience research insights with coaching tools to create and with the kind of stories which merge those two things, so readers could really understand why do they fall back to the old habits, why can't they just change just like that, and why in the first place we have those misconceptions that we should be able to change really, really quickly, which goes against the brain science.
And can you tell us how, as you were studying the brain, how you started getting your first clients in coaching? Did you start approaching people, or people started approaching you, or you started doing random experiments with,
I was really fortunate that at that time, at my University College London, they were selecting 10 people to train of the staff members to be trained as coaches for so-called internal coaching scheme. So the university basically paid for our training. In return, we had to coach people from university who asked for coaching. So it's like basically people getting, double qualifications and doing things on the side, which I absolutely enjoyed. We had really, really wonderful training by this business coaching company. And later on, HR department would receive requests from usually senior academics, senior researchers, with what issues they wanted to work with, such as, for example, somebody really, really good scientist starts running the team, but they might not be equipped with leadership skills. So they go on the leadership courses, but in addition to that, they assign the coach as well. So things like that. So I started working with department heads, research team leaders, senior lecturers, senior researchers. and helping them to solve really, really pragmatic problems they had. So somebody might have had procrastination issues, somebody might have a fear of public speaking, but they are so successful, they need to keep on going to the conferences and be speaking. So that was how I started, and carried on through my PhD. And after, so that was when I finished my PhD. Already at that time, I already somehow, I think because I was just doing my work and really passionate and talking to people in the events I was attending, and I was doing seminars, public seminars about neuroscience, I started getting clients then from my seminars I was encountering, you know, those people who I was encountering in the seminars. So somehow it just kind of took this natural flow, I suppose.
And uh, of course, I wonder what kind of people, or what was the main problem that people were having when they look for your service? Was it, oh, I want to improve my finances, I want to improve my love life, I want to improve my professional career? What was the main thing that people gravitated?
Majority, yeah, after my PhD, when I already was running my own consultancy, majority people were in the jobs they hated and they didn't know what to do. So I think at the beginning, majority of my clients were so-called career coaching clients who were really, they chose the sensible careers and suddenly found themselves in really quite senior positions, but feeling empty inside and not knowing what to do next. So I would say still majority of my clients overall from coaching were like that. But of course, when we work on career, we end up touching on emotional coping strategies and other things as well. And interestingly, sometimes when we worked on one area, other areas would improve as well, as everything is connected. So sometimes it's really hard to separate different fields, isn't it?
Well, I try, I used to be a financial advisor, and I tried coaching at one time in my life, coaching in the financial sense. And I gave up because I would look at someone's book and I say, wow, you earn enough money to be able to save X amount of money and you can retire in so many years. You know, all you have to do is just put a little bit of money aside. And they will say, yes, yes, of course, I understand. And we do the mathematics and the graph and all this. And then the following month, I will see the person buying a brand new car that he didn't need because his car was already new. And then the same person 6 months later will buy a vacation in Europe. And so I somehow, the logic of my advice was there, but somehow I didn't communicate it in a way that people didn't take action.
I think human behavior is complicated. We are not rational beings. We don't make decisions based on logic. Very, very infrequently we do. We are so-called rationalizing beings. So we make decisions based on emotional impulses or decision-making system one, based on Kahneman's two systems. And then we use our rational mind to justify why we did it.
Right. Yes, I found that all the time.
At the end of the day, especially with financial decisions, but also with a lot of eating choices and, you know, what people spend time with and so on, we make those choices not because it's the best possible option for us, but because it helps us to run away from certain emotions. For some people, they have this huge sense of loneliness or lack of significance, or it could be whatever emptiness we try to fill in. And buying things, consumerism, is one of the ways to fill in. So we call those emotional escapisms. And if we get in the habits of those escapisms, given that it's all very subconscious, we're not aware why we do it. And that's why people say, well, I know I should eat this donut. Why can't I stop, right? Because it means that it's subconscious. I don't make a rational choice. It's already became automatic. So in order to change it, we really need to take quite a few layers down and understand what's causing those emotions in the first place and address those emotions. Once we clear that out, it could be, childhood trauma, relationship trauma, it could be being an unfulfilling job, it could be many, many things. Once that's addressed, then making those rational, sensible decisions is easy. And that's why I think it's if we try to fix only external things, it doesn't last, because the deeper mechanisms still surface later on.
Right. I will tell you quite fast another issue that I find that I had to face quite often is the client who wanted to start their own business, and they were expert in this field and they knew everything about it, but they just needed to take just one more certificate in order to be ready. They just needed to have this perfect website that they haven't found the right website developer and the perfect graphic artist to do the business card. And then in fact, it was fear, but they put all these barriers in front of it. And some of these ex-clients, they never started that business that they dream so much about. But I see it as fear.
Yeah. Well, unknown is very scary, especially like if we look at the brain, right? So this is the real science.
Sexy brain.
So this all the wrinkly bit on the outside of the brain is the rational sense of us. It's called neocortex, a human brain, and that's the newest addition to the brain, which wants us to be our best self, which dreams about all those scenarios, is capable with enormous amount of creativity, courage, and you name it. So all the amazing qualities are there. Now, deep inside, if we open the brain, in the middle there, it's so-called mammal brain. Those structures are really, really ancient. They aren't that different to the brain structures in dogs, cows, and other mammals, hence called mammal brain, because other animals, even little mice, have very, very similar structures. Now, those structures need enormous amount of safety. And in the transitional periods, it could be in terms of starting your own business, it could be in terms of leaving a relationship that's not fulfilling, or doing any sort of unfamiliar path. Those areas are triggered. And when they're triggered, they cause so-called irrational behaviors. They push, we start to sabotage our success, as it's called in the coaching world. But the deep underneath is lack of safety. So in those scenarios, I always advise clients, first of all, do small steps, nothing major, but maintain as much safety as possible. So I notice with my clients, it works much, much better when they do so-called parallel careers. They still keep the job, but they start doing, like, maybe instead of becoming full-time coach or full-time something, they haven't really familiarized themselves with, they start coaching one client a week. Okay, and their brain starts accumulating familiarity around it, but also they start to accumulate success. They start to practice their skills and get the evidence of, I can do it. But when people work themselves up all the way, to the top of the mountain, and then they have to jump, right, it's too much, right? So it's usually like, it's best to do one step, jump off, 2 steps, jump off, like it's a kind of, and that's much, much more friendly for those ancient brain structures called mammal brain. And one of them, the most annoying one, called amygdala. Amygdala creates anxiety and fear and anger and aggression, actually, in the scenarios that seem like kind of lack safety for us, when we are, scared, basically. So the amygdala wants us to be safe. And if we don't have enough safety in our life, it would sabotage your next step.
Well, in that case, I feel like there are so many entrepreneurial books that do us some harm, because in many of them, I see the typical advice of jump off the cliff and grow your wings on their way down, or you either have to swim or sink. And of course, swim or sink, people are afraid to sink, and they just don't jump into the water.
And that's how we accumulate those unrealistic expectations to ourselves, right? And then we feel, of course, we feel underachieved, because these are not it's not possible to achieve them. it is maybe for short term, but long term, not so much. And also it depends, it depends on each situation, each scenario. So I always like, but I'm biased given that I'm a neuroscientist, I always like to think, okay, if you want to create a change, and the part of you which is capable of creating a change is your brain, we need to work with it as opposed to against it.
Right.
If you try strategies which go against, in particular, those ancient brain areas that require safety, they will block it, they will sabotage. And if you still don't listen, you'll get depressed, you'll get lack of energy, you'll get huge anxiety attacks. So they communicate to us in the symptoms, not in the words, not in the thoughts, in the physical symptoms. So I think it's very important to really listen to what your body is telling, what your emotions are telling. And that would, based on that, you can judge how bold actions you can take.
Yeah, I like that of incremental changes. Can you tell us how is it then you are studying neuroscience, you are having a few clients here and there, and your clientele is growing. How is it that you got the idea to write this book?
Well, this book is basically a simulation of my seminars and coaching tools I developed over the years. I finished my PhD in 2015, and from that point I was full-time coach and full-time speaker, developing seminars for companies such as Google, Yahoo, various banks, and so on. And in my seminars, I was combining neuroscience with coaching tools. In my coaching work, I was also creating that. And that's how it was approached, actually, by the publicity agents when I started writing articles in the UK magazines such as Guardian, Telegraph, and so on. That actually, wow, this is something interesting, some unique combination of those things. And in my book, I have 9 chapters, which are basically the 9 most popular seminars I delivered, both in the public setting and in the companies. Those seminars been both, kind of tweaked for different audiences. So it's really crystallized what really seemed to be universal truth for those areas. And those chapters are changing habits, changing emotions, changing personality traits, changing your productivity, looking after your brain health or changing your brain health, decision making, changing your relationship patterns, changing your communication, and changing your leadership style. So it's 9 quite varied topics, but they've been already, run through more than 10,000 people audience. So
Wow.
it's also,
Okay. So out of all those, which one, let's say, is quote unquote the most popular? Which one companies ask you the most to present?
habits and emotions. So
Oh.
changing habits and changing emotions, they've been probably 50-50, really, really popular. Now, when the pandemic started, I was asked also about how to look after your brain and productivity more, because the working style has changed quite significantly when people started working from home. So and leadership got popular as well, because, which leadership style is the most suitable to support people during the pandemic was a question as well. But I would say habits and emotions probably overall still.
Every time you speak, you open so many doors. But last night I was having dinner with some friends, and they were talking about how useful are personality tests, and I tend not to be. And they were encouraging me to take these personality tests, and because I don't know, it would describe perfectly who I am and how I behave, and I tend to believe or not believe in those personality tests because I think we can always change. So I feel like I don't want to square myself in a box. So I wonder if you have an opinion on personality tests. How valid are they or invalid? How much are we cornered into this corner that now we identify, oh, this is my personality trait, and now I'm stuck there forever?
Yeah, well, I think, let me mention that the term called confirmation bias.
Mm,
Okay, if I tell you you're an extrovert, I'm sure you can find a lot of scenarios when you're an extrovert. If I tell you that you enjoy spending time on your own and learning, I'm sure you can find some evidence for that as well. So there is quite a lot of that going on with the profiling, and in general, stereotyping people based on personality tests. So that's, of course, that's concerning. However, the testing has its place, time and place. I definitely wouldn't recommend for companies testing people and boxing them in and putting those in the jobs which describe it, because that just limits them to what skills they develop. And given the brain is plastic and we can always develop and learn, of course, it's not a good idea. However, there is one thing called neurodiversity. So in general, of course, our brains, each of us is neurodiverse. Each of us has a really unique brain, which is prefers certain things to others. So some guidelines are important to kind of pay attention to, as opposed to, just ignore and say, okay, we all the same. We aren't the same. We all different,
right.
actually. And based on how we learn, how we prefer to learn. Do you prefer, for example, when I learn, I just read things once, but I read it slowly and I create a visual map for myself. I never need to read a second time. And that's what I did all throughout my three different universities and school and so on. Now, my husband needs to read things 6 times. He reads the page really quickly, 6 times. And then he assimilates a lot of information. Now, he was labeled dyslexic, and that's probably, kind of one label. But all of us are really, really unique in the ways we learn, the ways we communicate, the things we really care about. So I wouldn't put it past completely, okay, it's not worth, kind of doing anything about it. I think it's worth being inquisitive and trying to understand what things do you truly care about? What things do you enjoy? What things do you prefer? What things you need to be fulfilled and satisfied? But definitely be cautious of kind of just boxing people based on really kind of rigid profiling and saying, oh, this is who I am, because that's self-fulfilling prophecy on its own. So it's I don't think, as with many questions, it's neither black nor white. It's somewhere in between.
Well, I find there's so much in your book. If I continue asking, I'm gonna have you here for 2 hours. So instead of that, I wonder if you could repeat one more time the title of the book and where can people follow you and find out more about you and the book.
So my book is called Why the F Can't I Change? Easiest to find my book is on Amazon, whichever country you're from. Best is to type my name, because I think Amazon doesn't like F word very much. So my name is Gabija Toleikyte, Gabija Toleikyte, Toleikyte. Also, if you just want to, browse my website and watch some of the videos of my seminars, and also get the direct links to my book from there, and read some articles I've written, then go to mybrainduringtheday.com.
Okay, perfect.
And people are, feel free to also follow my Twitter or various social media platforms where I post about my book and future books.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no worries. It was a pleasure.